The moment Tessa Quinn stepped onto the stage, which looked more like a street corner than a set, she became the target of mockery. No one cheered. Even the host dismissed her with a smirk, joking that she looked like a stray from the Greyhound station who had somehow wandered into the competition. They scoffed at her ripped jeans, zoomed in on her shaking hands, and placed bets on how fast she'd fail, convinced she'd stumble on the very first question. What they didn't know was that the quiet girl clutching a sketchbook stained with ink had a secret weapon, an extraordinary eidetic memory. And when she answered every single question without a hitch, the crowd was stunned into silence. What they witnessed wasn't luck. It was a mind that humbled an entire nation. The Las Vegas studio of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? U.S. edition glittered like a Roman Colosseum, built for battle. Blazing lights poured down on a stage where hopes were either crowned or crushed. The air buzzed with tension, tinged with the sharp scent of designer colognes and the arrogant chatter of spectators who wore their pride like custom suits. Their diamond-studded watches and high-fashion outfits weren't just accessories, they were declarations of self-proclaimed superiority. Into this high-stakes arena stepped Tessa Quinn, a 24-year-old from nowhere, almost ghost-like in her presence. Dressed in ripped jeans, a faded hoodie, and worn-out sneakers, her tangled hair framed a bare, makeup-free face. Clutching a sketchbook to her chest like armor, she stood out, and not in a way the crowd welcomed. The massive stage, bordered by LED screens and centered around the glowing hot seat, was typically reserved for polished contestants with sharp tongues and media-ready charm. And then there was the host, Mason Trent, sharp-witted and sharp-tongued, his tailored suit oozing sarcasm and superiority, a stark contrast to Tessa's unadorned appearance. Meanwhile, the guest judges, powerful figures with Ivy League backgrounds, lounged like royalty in their private booths, eyeing Tessa the way predators spot a wounded animal. The audience, a mix of tech moguls, influencers, and reality TV fans, sneered as they raised their phones, eager to capture her failure in high definition. But Tessa, calm and steady, scanned the room with the precision of a grandmaster. Despite her quiet nature, her presence was anything but weak, though the elite didn't notice. To them, she was just a disposable extra in their scripted drama, a character meant to be laughed off stage before the game even began. As she lowered herself into the hot seat, her ink-streaked fingers brushed the edges of her sketchbook, trembling slightly. From the VIP section, a group of smug tech entrepreneurs decked out in smartwatches and designer blazers burst into cruel laughter. Their jeers sliced through the room like knives, silencing the usual background buzz. One lean man, flaunting platinum cufflinks, stepped forward and raised his voice, loud, mocking, theatrical. "What's this? Some sidewalk scribbler thinks she can beat our quiz," he scoffed, twirling his blockchain-branded pen like it was a royal scepter. "That hoodie screaming soup kitchen? And those shoes? They're a disgrace to this stage. This is Millionaire, not an art class for street sketchers," he continued. "You're ruining the game just by sitting there looking like you missed your bus. Why don't you take your sketchbook and scurry back to whatever alley you came from before you embarrass yourself further?" Laughter erupted. Some even threw digital tokens toward the stage, treating her like a circus act. A reality TV mogul in a gold chain chuckled and nodded in approval, fueling the mob's cruelty. The camera zoomed in on Tessa's chipped nails, almost intentionally framing them as evidence of her supposed unworthiness. She didn't flinch. Tessa adjusted her sketchbook, her spine straightening, her face unreadable, a mask of quiet defiance. The insults landed like punches, but she didn't let them show. Still, the weight of their scorn felt heavy, almost physical, as the audience surged with venom, targeting not just her appearance, but her entire background. The humiliation hit hard the second she sat down, especially when Mason Trent arched an eyebrow and leaned into the mic. "So today we've got Tessa. From what street corner exactly?" he drawled, his tone dripping with contempt. The crowd howled. "You look more like you rolled off a Greyhound than out of a library, sweetheart. That hoodie's practically shouting homeless, and those sneakers? They're a joke. This is where we celebrate brilliance," he added, his grin razor-sharp. "Not where you bring a sketchbook and pretend it's a brain. You honestly thought you belonged in that seat?" He shook his head. "Do us all a favor and catch the next bus back to nowhere." The room exploded in laughter. Someone yelled, "She'll choke on the first question." The wave of ridicule hit its peak. Then came the challenge. Mason leaned forward again, his smirk like a blade. "Let's see if you can get past the $100 question without tripping over your own laces." Before any question appeared on the screen, a group of veteran quiz champions sitting in the front row, clad in monogrammed jackets and glossy loafers, joined the pile-on. Their laughter cut through the noise like barbed wire. One silver-haired contestant leaned in, his voice raised over the commotion. "Look at this. Some nobody thinking she can match our trivia scores," he shouted, waving a shiny trophy like a weapon. "She doesn't belong here. Those jeans are so shredded they're practically yelling vagrant. And that sketchbook? It's a disgrace to the legacy of this show," one of the veterans sneered. "This is Millionaire, a battleground for brilliance, not a place for someone to stumble and off the street thinking grit can replace knowledge. You're dragging down the show just by sitting in that chair," another scoffed. "It's like you wandered in from a dive bar. Why don't you do us all a favor and disappear before your clueless guesses ruin our night?" Their words hit like whiplash. A few even threw crumpled scorecards toward the stage, the paper missiles adding weight to their taunts. The insults echoed throughout the studio, relentless and coordinated. A fellow game show host, dressed sharply in a velvet bow tie, gave a smug nod, his smirk feeding the audience's cruelty. The cameras panned across Tessa's tangled hair, highlighting it as supposed proof of her failure. But Tessa remained composed. Her face didn't twitch, her silence unbroken. She sat still, calm, unreadable, her silence like a fortress holding back their venom. Meanwhile, the crowd's fury built into a crescendo, their mockery becoming a public attack that questioned her intellect, her background, even her right to be there. Then came the first question, the warm-up, worth $100. Mason leaned in, voice thick with condescension. "What color do you get by mixing red and white? A. Orange. B. Purple. C. Pink. D. Brown." Without missing a beat, Tessa answered clearly, C. Pink. Polite applause followed, quickly drowned out by cruel chuckles and muttered sarcasm. A guest judge leaned toward the mic with a smirk. "Well, she's not colorblind after all. Who would have guessed?" Laughter erupted again. Phones lit up as the audience captured her humiliation for the internet to devour. In the front row, a corporate executive whispered something snide to his neighbor, his gold cufflinks catching the light as if to underscore the mockery. Tessa's hands stayed steady, her sketchbook held close. Her silence was taut, not fear, but control. The mockery reached a fever pitch, turning what was supposed to be a quiz show into a spectacle of public shaming. The hot seat, meant to challenge intelligence, had become a stage for cruelty. Every giggle, every whisper, a calculated jab designed to fracture her composure. And yet, she didn't flinch. The second question came. Which animal is known as the king of the jungle? A. Elephant. B. Lion. C. Tiger. D. Leopard. B. Lion. Tessa answered, steady as ever. Her gaze locked on Mason. The audience howled even louder. One influencer shouted, "She's just guessing lucky. Wait till question 5. The camera zoomed in again on her chipped nails, an unspoken symbol of her struggle. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag #GreyhoundGenius and hashtag StreetCornerTessa trended online, each one another jab disguised as fascination. Mason's grin twitched. His voice oozed sarcasm. 2 for 2. Don't get cocky, kid. The guest judges exchanged glances, their pens tapping against their scorecards, a quiet approval of the crowd's derision. Tessa gripped her sketchbook a little tighter. Her expression didn't change. She remained a portrait of resilience, her silence now louder than the laughter. Next up, the third question for $300. Which gas do humans breathe in to survive? A. Carbon dioxide. B. Oxygen. C. Hydrogen. D. Nitrogen. B. Oxygen, Tessa said, without even blinking. Her voice rang clear and firm. For the first time, Mason's smugness wavered. His eyes narrowed slightly. The laughter began to fade, replaced by hushed murmurs rippling across the crowd. Either she's absurdly lucky, or, he muttered under his breath, uncertainty creeping into his tone as sweat gathered on his brow. The fourth question appeared. Which continent is home to the Sahara Desert? A. Asia. B. Australia. C. Africa. D. South America. C. Africa. Tessa replied instantly. Her eyes never left the host. There was no tremble in her voice, no hesitation, just quiet certainty. The audience, so used to seeing her as a joke, managed a half-hearted round of applause. But under that surface, something shifted. A ripple of curiosity stirred, soft, but real. The influencers, still gripping their phones, exchanged nervous looks. The mockery in their hashtags faltered, uncertainty creeping into their once arrogant posts. Tessa's quick, confident responses were beginning to suggest that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't luck at all. Mason leaned forward, his voice tinged with discomfort. 4 in a row. You're making this look easy. The guest judges, once lounging with smug ease, straightened in their seats. Their pens, once scribbling sarcasm, now hovered in hesitation. The cameras cut to Tessa's ink-smeared hands. Still. Steady. Her silence now felt like a brewing storm, shifting the air in the room. The mood in the studio flickered, rage mingling with curiosity. Each correct answer chipped away at the wall of arrogance surrounding her. By the time the 5th question, worth $1,000, flashed on screen, the atmosphere had changed. Not completely, but enough. Which city is home to the Eiffel Tower? A. Berlin. B. Rome. C. Paris. D. Madrid. C. Paris, she said, calm as ever. The studio fell quiet. The earlier jeers gave way to a hush that hung heavily in the air. Mason let out a nervous laugh. Well, look at that. She made it to question 5. Color me shocked. A guest judge leaned into the mic. Let's see if she can keep up with the big leagues. The camera zoomed in on her faded hoodie. Hashtag Lucky Tessa trended now, but it came with a different tone, still condescending, but less sure. Despite the shift, the echoes of mockery hadn't completely vanished. The crowd wasn't ready to cheer, not yet. But they were beginning to doubt their first impression. Tessa remained unmoved. Her sketchbook still hugged to her chest. Her silence, more defiant than ever. Then came the 6th question for $2,000. Who wrote the novel Frankenstein? A. Mary Shelley. B. Jane Austen. C. Charlotte Bronte. D. Louisa May Alcott. Oh, Mary Shelley, she answered without hesitation. Her voice level. Her gaze steady. The studio froze. Mason's sweat was now clearly visible, and for the first time, he stumbled over his words. You do know you have lifelines, right? He asked, a trace of his earlier swagger slipping. Then came question 7 for $4,000. Which ancient structure stood in Alexandria, Egypt? A. Great Pyramid. B. Hanging Gardens. C. Lighthouse of Alexandria. D. Colossus of Rhodes. Tessa answered without hesitation. C. Lighthouse of Alexandria. Her voice remained steady, her gaze unwavering, as if the question was merely routine. The audience, once cackling with contempt, leaned in. Their skepticism was thinning, giving way to hushed awe. In the VIP section, the tech elites exchanged nervous glances. Their hashtag Lucky Tessa hashtags fell silent as her flawless streak shattered their mockery. Under the bright studio lights, sweat gathered on Mason's forehead. His voice cracked. 7 in a row. You're starting to scare me, kid. The guest judges, previously bored and smug, suddenly began scribbling on untouched scorecards. Their earlier condescension faded into reluctant respect. The 8th question appeared, now for $8,000. Which artist painted The Persistence of Memory, the famous work featuring melting clocks? A. Pablo Picasso. B. Salvador Dali. C. Claude Monet. D. Edvard Munch. Tessa replied without pause. B. Salvador Dali. Her voice was quiet but sharp, a blade of certainty that sliced through the tension in the room. The audience, once eager for her failure, now sat motionless. Their phones lowered. Even the quiz show veterans leaned in, their former smirks replaced with focused curiosity. Their hashtags shifted from hashtag Street Corner Tessa to hashtag Tessarizing. Mason forced out a strained laugh. 8 correct. You're making us all look like amateurs. The judges leaned forward, their expressions sharpened by a dawning realization. This wasn't luck. This was something rare. By the 10th question, worth $32,000, the studio crackled with suspense. Which scientist invented the modern vaccine for polio? A. Alexander Fleming. B. Edward Jenner. C. Jonas Salk. D. Robert Koch. Tessa answered with calm precision. C. Jonas Salk. The next screen lit up, $64,000 on the line. Which element has the chemical symbol Sn? A. Silver. B. Tin. C. Sodium. D. Strontium. B. Tin, she said firmly. Her eyes never blinked. The room fell silent. No more whispers. No more jokes. Just reverence. The audience leaned forward as though witnessing a miracle in real time. Phones pointed not to humiliate, but to remember, to honor. The once mocking moguls in the front row sat frozen. Their hashtags now read, hashtag Tessa Genius and hashtag From Ink to Glory. Mason's voice trembled. That's 11 correct. You're changing the entire game. The guest judges, once distant, began clapping softly, then steadily. Their pins were down, their eyes fixed on Tessa as if she'd become a living monument to brilliance. Next, the $250,000 question. Which country is home to the ruins of the ancient city of Petra? A. Egypt. B. Jordan. C. Greece. D. Turkey. Tessa didn't even blink. B. Jordan. Her voice rang like a bell through the reverent hush. The crowd now hung on her every syllable. The influencers who once sneered were now frozen, humbled, phones lowered, their taunts long forgotten. Mason wiped his brow. 13 questions and 13 flawless answers. You're a phenomenon, Tessa. The judges rose to their feet. Their applause rang through the studio, no longer polite, but thunderous. She was no longer a contestant. She was a legend in motion. Then, the million-dollar question appeared, the ultimate test. Which astronomical object was reclassified from planet to dwarf planet status in 2006? A. Ceres. B. Pluto. C. Eris. D. Charon. Tessa answered with calm authority. B. Pluto. Reclassified by the International Astronomical Union. A beat of silence. Then the screen glowed. Correct. Golden confetti exploded. Applause shook the rafters. Tessa remained seated, calm amid the chaos. Her ink-smeared hands gripped the sketchbook, once mocked, now sacred. A neuroscientist, invited as a guest, rose from her seat. Her voice boomed across the studio, rich with awe. Tessa Quinn, she declared, your memory is a beacon of human potential. Your mind has redefined the boundaries of intelligence. The crowd, once hungry for humiliation, now rose in unison. Cheers erupted. Phones lit up, not for mockery, but to immortalize this moment. The screen behind her no longer showed questions. It displayed one word. Genius. The tech moguls who'd sneered before sat frozen. Their flashy tokens now seemed childish. Their status, erased by Tessa's poise and precision. Reporters scrambled to capture headlines. From hood to hero, the sketchbook prodigy. Ink-stained genius shocks the world. The quiz veterans, once prideful and smug, now clutched their trophies like they were relics of a different age, obsolete in Tessa's shadow. A world-renowned quizmaster stepped into the spotlight. His very presence silenced the room. For decades, he'd crowned champions. But today felt different. He turned to her. Tessa Quinn, he said, your perfect run is more than a victory. It's a legacy. You've redefined what it means to be brilliant. He lifted her sketchbook in both hands. From this day on, we'll honor the world's most overlooked minds with the Tessa Quinn Award. You've taught us all that genius wears no uniform. The camera zoomed in, her torn jeans, her hoodie, her calm face. Her answers weren't just right, they were revolutionary. The crowd roared. Their jeers had become cheers. Their laughter, now reverence. And social media? Flooded with hashtag Tessa the Legend. The studio lights, once cruel and exposing, now cast her in gold. No one would forget. Tessa Quinn, the girl with the sketchbook, had changed everything. Every cheer was no longer noise, it was a tribute. A standing ovation for her resilience, her intellect, her dignity. The quizmaster's vow to include Tessa's story in his memoirs wasn't just praise, it sealed the fate of those who had mocked her. Their legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. A symbol of arrogance exposed. The audience swelled with pride, witnessing not just a victory, but a coronation. Then, a producer stepped forward, his voice unsteady, raw with emotion. Cameras are still rolling, he announced. Ladies and gentlemen. Tessa Quinn now holds the official Guinness World Record for eidetic memory, the rare ability to permanently retain everything she reads. The room held its breath. She's declined every global competition for 5 years. Today, she came here for one reason, to prove a point. He looked toward the audience, and then to Mason. The woman you mocked might just be the smartest person in America. Gasps. Then silence. Then a wave of stunned admiration. Another judge stepped forward, a respected trivia historian whose books had defined the genre. Her voice was calm, solemn. My earlier doubts, she said, now feel like relics of a smaller mind. She turned to Tessa. Your perfect run didn't just win this game. It has redefined what we thought was possible. Her gaze dropped to Tessa's worn sneakers, no longer symbols of poverty, but of power. We dedicate this season to your mind, unmatched, undeterred, unforgettable. The camera zoomed in on Tessa's serene expression. Her sketchbook lay in her lap, no longer a target of ridicule, but a symbol of defiance and brilliance. Every frame of her journey was now a monument. The audience's applause thundered again, not out of duty, but devotion. Their fury at the mockery she'd endured had turned into awe at the honor she now received. Each judge's tribute felt like another nail in the coffin of arrogance. The quiz show veterans, the ones who had thrown their scorecards in contempt, now stood still. Their once-coveted trophies felt like hollow echoes beside Tessa's name. The old hashtags, #StreetCornerTessa, #LuckyTessa, were dead. Now, only one tag trended globally, #TessaTheGenius. Tessa rose slowly from the hot seat. She adjusted her faded hoodie, once mocked, now sacred, and met Mason Trench's trembling eyes. "I don't want your money," she said. Her voice was calm, razor-sharp. "I want you to learn silence, and to never judge anyone by what they wear." A hush swept across the studio. Then, a tall woman rose from the audience, a world-renowned philanthropist, known for funding schools and scholarships in underserved communities. Her voice was warm, commanding. "Tessa Quinn," she said, "your mind is a gift to humanity. A reminder that brilliance is often overlooked because of bias." She turned to the cameras, her hand over her heart. "In your honor, my foundation will launch a global scholarship initiative to find and uplift minds like yours. Not just here, but around the world." The camera caught Tessa's gentle nod. Her hoodie now looked like a cape. Her performance, a quiet rebellion that had become a global movement. The press scrambled. From scorn to scholar. The sketchbook that shamed a nation. Tessa, the genius who refused to be erased. Each headline carried weight. The moguls who had once whispered insults now stood in silence. Their gold cufflinks dim under the lights, their confidence shattered. The influencers, who had started the #GreyhoundGenius trend, now stared blankly at their phones, abandoned in their laps. Their clout, their smugness gone. The camera caught Tessa announcing, almost quietly, "I'll be donating my winnings to fund scholarships for kids who feel like they don't belong." She turned and walked off the stage. The entire nation watched. Her clip went viral within the hour. As she disappeared behind the curtain, a third judge, a cognitive scientist whose research had defined modern memory studies, stood up. His voice was deep, unwavering. "Tessa Quinn," he said, "your eidetic memory isn't just extraordinary, it's a scientific marvel." He looked out at the stunned studio. "We will establish a research grant in your name to study cognitive excellence and the mind's true potential." Another cheer broke out. The audience rose again. This time, not just in applause, but in reverence. Every earlier insult had turned to ash. Even the most powerful tech entrepreneurs, who had once laughed from their VIP seats, now sat trembling. Their blockchain bravado dissolved. Their influence erased. The philanthropist's final words rang through the studio like a closing argument. "Tessa Quinn will serve as an ambassador for our foundation, a voice for those dismissed before they're seen." The audience's hearts pounded with pride, their eyes wet with emotion. Mason Trent, his once cutting sarcasm now a ghost, stepped forward. His voice, once biting, was soft and humbled. "Tessa Quinn," he said slowly, "you didn't just win millionaire. You humbled us. You made us better." He swallowed. "We would be honored if you returned to guest host our season finale, so we can celebrate your genius the way it deserves." The cameras captured Tessa's final glance back. Her expression composed, her hoodie and sketchbook now sacred relics of a mind that changed the world. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence she left behind said it all. "We will launch a new international championship in your name, a tribute to intellectual excellence," the show's creator declared, his voice echoing through the studio like a vow. The cameras zoomed in on Tessa's face, calm, unwavering. Her torn jeans, once ridiculed, now symbolized quiet resistance and victory. Her every answer had not just dismantled trivia, they dismantled an entire system built on mockery and appearance. Each one struck like a hammer against arrogance. The crowd that had once jeered now stood in awe. Their earlier rage had evolved into reverence. The studio transformed into a cathedral of redemption. Every word spoken in Tessa's honor felt like a guillotine slicing through the pride of those who had tried to belittle her. The quiz veterans, who had laughed first, now trembled last. Their gold-plated trophies glinted under the lights like faded memories of a status they no longer held. The trending hashtags had shifted completely. #StreetCornerTessa was obliterated. Now only one phrase reigned. #TessaGenius. News outlets across the globe flooded feeds with her name, describing her as the silent mind that shamed a nation. Headlines read, "From hoodie to hero. Sketchbook savage. Tessa Quinn's mind rewrites the game." Underdog uprising. The influencers who once sneered and chanted, "Next," sat frozen, their phones dark, their reputations reduced to rubble. One by one, their followers vanished. Their accounts flagged and suspended. Their legacy, forgotten. The showrunner's announcement of a full-length documentary chronicling Tessa's journey sealed the final blow to the arrogant elite. Their place in the narrative was now clear, the footnotes to someone else's legend. As Tessa exited the building under a rain of applause, a crowd gathered beneath the neon hum of Las Vegas. Journalists, students, scientists, and strangers all pressed together just to catch a glimpse. From the silence rose a chant. Silent genius. Silent genius. The head judge stepped into the street behind her, his voice rising over the buzz of the city. Tessa Quinn, he said, eyes fixed on her weathered canvas sneakers, your mind didn't just win a game, it ignited a global awakening. You are the voice of the unheard. He paused. Your legacy will open next season. You are not a contestant. You are the gold standard. The cameras panned to Tessa's gentle smile, her sketchbook hugged to her chest, a shield, a story, a symbol. She hadn't just left a mark, she carved a legacy into stone. Back inside the studio, as the lights dimmed and applause lingered like a hymn, another figure emerged, a revered librarian, whose life's work had built the very archives that shaped academic culture. She stood tall, her voice cutting clean through the Las Vegas night. Tessa Quinn, she said, with quiet authority, your mind is a living archive, a sacred scroll of memory and perseverance. And then the proclamation. The Library of Congress will dedicate a permanent exhibit to your eidetic memory, a legacy to outlast generations. The cameras followed Tessa's silhouette disappearing into the night, her hoodie fluttering, her sketchbook steady, the final image of a woman who never needed a spotlight, only a chance. The audience inside swelled with pride. Every cruel word once hurled her way now felt like a sin. Each compliment now an overdue confession. The corporate moguls who had mocked her cowered in the background. Their hashtag Lucky Tessa hashtags buried beneath the avalanche of hashtag Tessarizing. The influencers who had once trended for ridicule found their feeds wiped clean. Their followings collapsed. Their identities erased by brilliance. The librarian's final words echoed across every newsfeed. Tessa Quinn's story will be preserved as a national treasure, a permanent testament to the victory of intellect over prejudice. Her rise wasn't just inspirational, it was seismic. Her victory reverberated beyond the game, reshaping the entire culture of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The press unearthed her past, a child prodigy who had memorized entire libraries by 10, who had declined scholarships to support her struggling mother, who had worked odd jobs to buy textbooks she couldn't afford. Her genius had never been nurtured. It had been buried. And now, finally, unleashed, other quiz shows offered her seats. She refused them all. Her silence was her answer, and it spoke louder than any question ever could. The audience that once laughed at her now faced themselves in the mirror. Their shame permanent. Their status, vapor. Her victory wasn't measured in money. It was a lesson, carved into the DNA of the show. The simplest girl on stage had wielded the deadliest mind. Behind the scenes, the show's entire production shifted. New producers stepped in, demanding humility. They rewrote the format to honor substance, not flash. Tessa had redrawn the definition of power. The lights that once illuminated arrogance now reflected its failure. Her flawless run haunted every episode. Her image, hoodie, sketchbook, canvas shoes, stood framed beside the millionaire logo, a reminder of what real genius looks like. Mason Trent, once the show's untouchable host, faced public reckoning. His earlier sarcasm trended alongside his forced apology. His credibility? Gone. His name? A warning. The influencers blacklisted. The culture that celebrated cruelty dismantled. Tessa's scholarships rolled out weeks later, supporting underprivileged students with raw potential. Her victory now fueled others. Her name became a chant in quiz halls. A mantra. A legend. A lesson. The audience members who had shouted her down were now ostracized. Their reputations shattered. Their jeers a distant echo beneath her triumph. Ratings skyrocketed. Sponsors begged to be part of her legacy. The show's format was rebuilt from the ground up, no longer spectacle, but celebration of mind. Tessa was seen at a charity gala weeks later. Her faded hoodie unchanged. Her presence like thunder wrapped in silence. She didn't need their lights. She didn't need their stage. She had already answered. And they had failed. 9 questions. 9 seconds. That's all it took. The silent genius didn't need their world. She had already conquered it. And as the audience screamed her name, their roar ricocheted through time. Tessa Quinn didn't come for applause. She didn't care for the check. She came to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The ones you laugh at are often the ones you should fear the most. Like, share, comment, subscribe, because next time, the genius they mock might be sitting in your living room.